All right, let's dive in. We're going back to 1688, to a revolution in England that completely redefined what government even means. It's known as the Glorious Revolution, a coup that was so fast, so decisive, it permanently changed the rules of power, not just for England, but really for the whole world.
You know, for the entire 17th century, England was obsessed with one single question. A huge one. Who's really in charge? Is it the king, with his absolute God-given power? Or is it Parliament, the people making the laws? I mean, everything, literally everything hinged on the answer to that.
And then, in 1688, bam, they got their answer. The Glorious Revolution. This wasn't just about swapping out one king for another. Nope. This was the final word, the definitive verdict in this long, long struggle for control. And the reason we call it glorious? Well, it's because it managed to settle this epic fight with almost no bloodshed, which is pretty remarkable, right?
But look, a revolution like this doesn't just pop up out of thin air. Not at all. It was really the explosive finale to a whole century of simmering tension, even outright war, and just this deep, deep distrust between the crown and Parliament.
I mean, that century was just a political roller coaster. Think about it. They had a brutal civil war, they literally executed their king, which was shocking, then they tried out a republic for a bit, and then they brought the monarchy back. Power was just swinging back and forth like a giant pendulum. But by 1688, that pendulum was about to grind to a halt.
So the person who finally pushed everything to the breaking point, that would be King James II. He gets the throne in 1685, and he walks right into this massive power struggle that's been going on for decades. And his actions, well, they were like throwing gasoline on a fire.
See, James II had this idea that he ruled by divine right, meaning his power came straight from God, not from some pesky laws made by Parliament. So right away, he's on a collision course with them. And then there's the fact that he was openly Catholic in a very Protestant country. He started just ignoring laws he didn't like, putting his Catholic friends in powerful jobs, and to top it all off, he was building up a big, permanent army. A lot of people looked at that and thought, uh-oh, that army is for us. So for Parliament, this wasn't just some political squabble, it felt like an attack on the soul of the nation.
And you know, the fear wasn't just about religion. It was about what that religion represented back then. People would look over at France with a king like Louis XIV and see Catholic absolutism, a king whose word was law, period. The English elites were terrified of losing all their rights, all their freedoms, to a king who answered to absolutely no one.
So for about 3 years, this fear is just brewing, right? It's getting worse and worse. And then, in 1688, one thing happens, just one event, and it turns all that anxiety into a real, concrete, and pretty radical plan.
So what was it? A big battle? A new law? Nope. In 1688, King James's wife had a baby boy, and that was the tipping point. Why? Well, because a son meant the threat of a permanent Catholic dynasty. Suddenly, the problem wasn't just dealing with one Catholic king, it was the idea of a whole line of them, stretching into the future, all ruling without any check from Parliament. And for his opponents, that was it. That was the last straw.
So, feeling pretty desperate, a small group of really powerful English nobles, they did something wild. They secretly wrote a letter. And who did they send it to? To William of Orange, the Protestant leader over in the Netherlands. Now, William also happened to be married to James's own Protestant daughter, Mary. And the letter was basically an invitation to invade England and, as they put it, save their country and their religion.
And what happened next is, well, it's pretty astonishing. The plan worked. It worked incredibly fast, and maybe most importantly, with almost zero bloodshed.
So it all unfolds really quick. In November of '88, William and his army land in England. But there's no big fight. Instead, he finds that King James's support has just evaporated. Poof, gone. By December, even his own commanders had abandoned him, and the king just flees to France. Parliament jumps on this opportunity, declares the throne is now empty, and offers the crown to William and Mary together.
Now, if you really want to understand why this gets the label glorious, just think about the French Revolution that happened about 100 years later. This had none of that. There was no mass uprising from the streets, no reign of terror, no massive social chaos. This was a revolution from the top down. It was led by the elites, and their goal was to change the Constitution. So yeah, it was less a bloody popular revolt and more like a surgically precise transfer of power.
But here's the thing. This transfer of power, it came with some serious strings attached. William and Mary couldn't just waltz in and rule like James II did. They had to agree to a brand new set of rules, rules that were going to change English government forever.
And these new rules were all laid out in the famous Bill of Rights of 1689. This was basically a new contract for the monarchy. First and foremost, it made it crystal clear. Parliament is supreme. The king is under the law, not above it. It also gave Parliament the power of the purse, which is huge. It means the king can't raise taxes without their okay. And finally, it guaranteed things like free elections and basic rights for people, like being able to complain to the king without getting arrested.
Okay, so why does any of this matter today to all of us? Because these ideas, these core principles, that a government only gets its power because the people agree to it, not from God, and that even the rulers have to follow the law, well, that became the foundation for modern democracy. In fact, American colonists would use these exact same arguments against another English king about a century later.
So really, if there's one big takeaway here, it's this. The entire source of a ruler's power got flipped on its head. Power wasn't flowing down from God to the king anymore. Now it was flowing up from the law, a law created by the people's representatives in Parliament.
And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. This whole revolution worked, not because of some epic battle, but because the powerful people in the country just withdrew their support. They took their consent away from one king and gave it to someone else. So it makes you wonder, if so-called absolute power can be toppled with just an invitation, what does that tell us about where true power really lies?